For women who took on the load of a relationship, i.e. financially, primary caretaker, kids, one-sided relationship, planning everything, doing all the housework, etc. What was your light bulb moment it was time to end the relationship? This post is locked, so I am unable to reply to newer comments. But I did want to thank everyone who was able to comment for sharing some insight into what led you to walk away and find newfound happiness. I am proud of each and every one of you. Hopefully this post helps encourage other women who are unsure to find the strength to choose themselves first. It occurred to me one day that there would be no relationship if I stopped trying. I was doing 100% and he was doing 0%. So one day, I just stopped everything. We didn't have a final conversation or anything at all. I just stopped talking to him and we never talked again. It was a 4-year relationship. When he screamed at me for leaving a light on while he was sleeping, 2 days after I had brain surgery and was still on some very strong painkillers. The best decision I ever made was leaving him. My husband was gone for a few days and the kids, and I didn't even notice. Lol. It was when I was 2 weeks postpartum with our second child and bedridden, and he left to take a 10-day retreat, vacation in California. He called and said what a relief it was to feel free of me and babies on the beach. It was the first time I thought, this is wrong, I am being used. In retrospect, the financial abuse where he drained my wealth should have done it, but it was the more physically vulnerable postpartum time that got the message through. When our sex life fell apart. We were having sex once every 4 to 6 months. I was practically begging for it, but every time we tried I realized I didn't even want him anyway because I was too busy being the manager of the household and basically his mother. I was 29 years old, but every time I looked in the mirror I felt like a washed-up old woman. That was the last straw. Oh hell, mine was the moment back in 2010 when he called his mom on the phone and asked if he could go live with her. He didn't mention if we, myself and our 5-year-old son, could also live with her. I had to ask him very out loud, so she could hear me, what about us? Then he changed it to, oh yeah, and them too. I knew then love was no longer a thing between us and I'd fallen out of love at that very moment. He complained about having to go grocery shopping. I had made the menu for the week, planned, budgeted and pretty much paid for all of it. It made me so mad I told him to suck it up. He didn't why I couldn't do it. At the time I was working pretty much 2 full-time jobs and going to school. He was working 30 hours and used the rest to play video games. I have him a rundown of all I did at home and how much more I paid for everything. He half apologized. That was a big wake-up call. Then that weekend he canceled the first date we were going to have in months last minute. He woke up late because he was tired, but his friends called and he was up and ready to go in 5 minutes. By the time he got back home none of his stuff was in the bedroom. And finally I went out with a friend for coffee and I realized that I was laughing. And it hit me that I hadn't heard myself laugh in a really long time. I almost started crying when I realized how sad my life was and how miserable I felt. When I got back home I told him I was moving out. He asked me where we were moving to. It took him a second to realize that I meant that I was moving out by myself. He suggested therapy, open relationships. He started actually cooking and cleaning, but it was too late. A month later I was out of there. He ended up living in his car, crashing it, ended up homeless for a bit. Moved in with someone else he got involved with while still trying to get back together with me. His friends reached out to tell me I was overreacting. I wasted over 5 years with him. Leaving him was the best thing I ever did. My current partner is amazing, always has time for me, and he will help me out at home even without me asking. When I started to look forward to his business trips, because everything was so much easier and more pleasant when he was gone. I was only cleaning up after myself and an infant. Which, that sucks in and of itself, but there was no second adult making messes and waking me up in the middle of the night to pester me for sex. I got the idea, this could be every day. I made it happen. And then the baby was the only one waking me up, because that's what babies do. When he was nearly 30 and pretended he didn't know what a baking sheet, cookie sheet was because I asked him to make dinner one night, it was a frozen lasagna. The instructions were to put it on a cookie sheet and shove it in the oven. Wow. Literally weaponized incompetence and such a turn-off. He likes to say he is the man and I need to do as he says. He said this to me when I was practically begging him to help me around the house. He's the man of the house even when I pay for 100% daycare, 100% utilities, 100% groceries and half our rent, and took care of our kids, the pets, cleaning and cooking. Sadly, it wasn't that or the abuse or the cheating that woke me up. It was my kid telling me when can make it without him. We never looked back after that. I was doing everything but paying the rent and bills, and I offered to pay a fair portion, but he insisted that he ought to do it. I was keeping house, running errands, making minor repairs, planning dates, you name it, it was me. I was encouraging him to pursue his dream job as a writer, so he would spend his time after work in the office. I cleaned up for him and I would bring him his dinner. I found out that he hadn't been writing at all. He had been playing StarCraft for weeks, maybe months, while I waited on him so he could write. Then I found out that his parents were paying for everything for us. Rent and bills. His paycheck went mostly to buying bullshit he didn't need. I've told this story before, but his parents weren't wealthy and his dad worked a very taxing blue-collar job. I kept going to take a shower and realizing I already had. The only time I had a minute to myself was in the shower. It was like working 2 full-time jobs. Worked all day in the office to drive home to do housework, childcare until bed. I would wake up hating life. Now I'm single and so much happier. When I had cancer and had to have surgery. My grandma was coming over and I asked him to do the dishes, not much because I did them before I went to the hospital. He complained the entire time and we got into a fight. He told me it was his coping skill. I ended up doing them with a drain coming from my neck. He called out of work to help me, but played video games all day long and I did everything for myself. He took me to my follow-up appointment and road raged on our way there, then lectured me after I got upset with him. He wouldn't come into the appointment with me. I left that day. It's been 2.5 weeks since I moved back in with my parents and I realize if I had stayed, nothing would have changed. Lies have since come out and he has been blocked. I am healing, mentally and physically. I just can't believe myself for letting it get that far. When he told me I should tell him what he should do that would make me happy. I mean, if you on your own cannot think of single thing that would be able make me feel prioritized in your life and want me to tell you even that. Then sorry, bye. I used to tell my ex, I can't think for the both of us. Oh, there were a ton. But something that was just the beginning of the end. He abandoned me when I almost died during my C-section. When he came back he only had a half-assed apology. And he didn't even bother to buy me flowers. 'Twas a lonely time in my life. And the beginning of a darker, harder, lonelier time. When his dad asked me why I was staying with such an awe when I wasn't even related to him. You don't owe him anything. Neither do we, but he's our son. It made me realize I'd been waiting for permission to leave the whole time. Well done to that guy's dad. He saw what needed to be said. It just stopped. I had no more mental energy. We were living in a somewhat fundamentalist Christian community and I had no support as a wife or a woman. I reached out for help and no one was there. I became suicidal. It was oddly enough his boss telling me that I had to be a better wife or leave today. I left that day. When I had suffered through 1.5 years of postpartum depression without realizing it, and I was sitting on the couch with our child sleeping in my arms, and I was sobbing to my then husband, saying something is wrong with me. I need help. I can't do this alone. He didn't even look up from his phone. He just kept scrolling and flatly said, I already raised my kids. This one is yours. Stayed with him 8.5 more years for a total of 12. Finally out now, though. When he had an affair while I was busy taking care of everything so he could golf on the weekends to relax after working all week, we both worked full-time, and then blamed me because I wasn't a good partner. All while not noticing that I was deeply depressed. When he told me I'm too hard to please. I am that person in my current, ending, relationship. The kids are just my kids and they are older and require less supervision than young children. He literally goes to work and comes home. He contributes financially but I handle the most since I make more and that was never the problem for me. There was a major lack in contribution from him and household chores, no cooking, bare minimum of cleaning but wanted a pat on the back after taking out the trash or washing a few dishes. It becomes overwhelming for one person to handle everything all the time. The breaking point for me came as him comparing me to ex-girlfriends as if I wasn't living up to their expectations of what he had before me, even though the exes were crazy and abusive, he's previously pointed out to me. Time to move on. When I was the only one working at the time, did all of the cooking, was expected to clean our apartment on my breaks and lunches, IWFH, and he somehow got it in his head that I had to listen and be obedient to him because he was the man in the relationship. He discovered Kevin Samuels and suddenly he was above me despite me being the sole provider and caretaker of everything: cooking, cleaning, animals, mental load, etc. He did nothing and brought absolutely nothing to the relationship, yet I was supposed to let him lead. I knew as soon as I started hearing the sexist rhetoric that it was well past time to go. There were multiple, but one of the big ones was posting questions like this on Reddit, reading the threads and searching for comments that would validate my wanting to leave. Any reason you have is a valid reason, even if it's just feeling off. If that's you, this is your push. Ended a 6-year relationship about 6 months ago and I dreaded it and felt terrible doing, and it was hard afterwards, but I'm now really glad I did it. Especially since we still talk and there are moments when I get stressed and then I think, wait, this isn't my problem anymore, which is such a freeing feeling. I was away for a couple of months, about a month, and I cried on the phone with him because I missed him, and all I wanted was to know I wasn't alone in this, that he missed me too. He got angry and said I'm asking too much of him. So he stopped talking to me, 'cause I was upset he didn't miss me. When my ex told me, per usual, pick a restaurant I wanted to go to for my birthday. I choose a semi-nice spot. He proceeded to dress like a bum and hunch over his plate the whole time like I forced him to go there with me. We get home, he immediately goes to work. I sent a long sad text message, on my birthday, asking what I was doing wrong for him to not want to spend time with me in general or even touch me the past 2 years. His response was it wasn't me, it was him and some lame-ass excuse. He then came home, early, from work, put on some uninteresting movie, touched me a little and tried to pity fuck me. When I say he tried to pity fuck me, I mean he poorly started having sex and then laid there like a dead fish while I bounced a couple times and then had to leave. I cried myself to sleep that night. He didn't think anything was wrong. I was fucking done. I did everything, except his dishes and laundry, because I cared. Cleaned everything. Bought everything. Entertained and fed his shitty friends. Even sent his mom flowers for her birthday and Mother's Day because he never remembers. His birthday and Christmas I always made special. Cool, awesome gifts I knew he wanted, along with doing whatever absurd activity he'd just have to do, like rustic camping for 11 days. What did I get on my birthdays and Christmas? Stuff I'm not into or completely not my style. Regardless of me making a short, yet detailed, inexpensive list of what I want. What did I get on all the other days? Ignored unless I was needed as an accessory. It was so one-sided for too long. After he beat the shit out of me while pregnant twice, causing me to miscarry, it was definitely a one-sided relationship. I have no words to express my sympathies. You and your babies did not deserve that. Proud of you for walking away. Thank you. Still trying to recover, but turns out I am gay and happier than ever with my girlfriend. When he became my 4th child. I gave birth to 3 children, I didn't need a 4th. When he sat me down after a long day, of me working 2 jobs, going to school and raising our child, to tell me about how I'm not meeting his needs. Oh wow. I can see you're really busy, but what about my penis? Sounds too familiar. I worked full-time, took care of everything at home, baked bread and cooked everything from scratch. Yet in the evening, night, he repeatedly told me that he is annoyed that I am so tired and not trying to please him. He basically wanted me to survive doing all that on 2 to 3 hours of sleep and be happy and cheerful. Yeah, I am better off alone. When I found out he'd had a whole other relationship for 6 months, while I'd been the only one working and paying for our home, car, dog care, and to top it off for his flights to visit her. Obviously I wasn't aware that's what the flight was for. When she dumped him when she found out I existed, he asked to get back together with me and I was filled with disgust. I'd always thought I wouldn't be brave enough to end things with him, but it was such a relief. I was immediately over any heartbreak I thought there'd be. When she was so terrible with our finances that I had to get a second job, We had to get roommates, and the whole time she came up with excuse after excuse as to why she couldn't get another job and why she couldn't cut back on her spending. And then she turned around and bought her mom a Disney trip on my credit card without even asking me first or giving me a heads up. I found out when I went pay the bill and it was a couple $1,000s higher than I expected. I stayed with her for so long because I'd grown up with people saying relationships are hard work. So I thought it was the right thing to do to stay with her and work through our issues together. But at that point I realized I didn't care if it made me a bad person or an asshole. I had no desire to continue to be someone's piggy bank. 6 months after leaving her, I scraped enough together for a down payment on a house. 6 months. I kick myself imagining how much more money I'd have had I left her sooner. That's how much she was bleeding from me. We had eloped in Gatlinburg, and we returned for our 3rd anniversary. It was supposed to be a romantic trip to celebrate. I was sitting up looking at trail maps and tried to get him to join me, but he started yelling at me with the strangest, seemingly misdirected anger. Yelled at me to go to sleep, because he doesn't want to look at the trail maps. We were staying in a room with 2 beds, and I turned off the light, got in my own bed, and cried. That's when I knew I was living a life I didn't want, with someone I can barely stand. Good ending. I sat down with him and had a talk about how overwhelmed I was while he was dragging his feet finding a better job and calling out every other day from his commission-only job, while I was working too. Found out he had been in a major slump and was too scared to admit his emotional struggles. He gave me a heartfelt apology and got his shit together within a week. And I got my shit together because of that. Then we both learned to be more attentive and communicative partners. No more slump for him, no more burnout for me. He found a job he loves, I quit my second job. Our relationship is better than ever. After years of doing everything, I had enough of him doing nothing but being abusive and cheating. The relationship died years ago and I treated him like a flatmate more than a husband due to the abusive behavior and the cheating. I was only staying because he was in an accident and needed a carer. One night after he came back from staying at his fling's house for the weekend, he asked for sex, and like the last many months before, I said no. I told him he can just go find someone else like normal. So he decided that me being mouthy deserved to be put in my place, so he beat me and R'd me to show me he can take what he wants. After years of not reacting, I finally snapped and told him I am done and to get out. I started chucking his stuff outside, telling him I am going to find me a real man because there are some out there. He didn't like this and told me no one's going to want a used up SL*T. He was my first in everything, so that made no sense. I laughed at him and said just because he's one doesn't mean everyone else is. He said if he can't have me then no one will. He then spent hours torturing me, beating me, breaking bones, teeth and using me all night until he left me for dead and went to work the next day. I managed to climb out and get help and never looked back. He moved in with that side piece to be together. A few months later she cheated on him and got married to another guy. A few months after that she cheated on that guy with someone else. Lol. My ex tried contacting me with saying he's sorry and how she broke his heart and will I take him back. The only reaction he got from me was being blocked. He now is engrassaged to a different woman and they have a kid together.